He broke every mold. He changed the world.
Known as the Mouth of the South and Captain Outrageous, Ted Turner built a media empire that changed cable news forever.
I didn't have any upper limits to how far we could go.
Champion, philanthropist, environmentalist.
I don't know how to quit. It's not in my genes.
But growing up wasn't easy for Ted. Born in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1938, his parents sent him to boarding school when he was just 4 years old.
I didn't like boarding school. I wanted to be home.
Ted's little sister, whom he adored, died of lupus at 17. About 2 years later, Ted dropped out of Brown University. He'd been studying classics until his father cut off the money.
He thought I was wasting my time.
So he went to work for his dad's billboard company. But tragedy struck again when his father killed himself.
He went against everything that he taught me, to be courageous and hang in there.
Ted took over the family business and coped with the loss by working even harder.
He said, set your goals so high that you can't achieve them in your lifetime.
When Ted wasn't working, he turned to the sport he loved, sailing.
We gotta go fast as we can here.
And won the sport's top race, the America's Cup.
I had worked very hard. It took me a number of years to become a champion.
He put that same drive into expanding the business. In 1970, Ted bought a struggling TV station.
It was a broken down UHF television station in Atlanta. He was going to transform UHF television into this new world of satellite television.
Ted renamed the station WTBS, and it became the country's first superstation.
What Ted made happen was just as important as the internet revolution of the 90s and 2000s.
But starting out, Ted needed content. He bought the Atlanta Braves and broadcast their games nationwide.
The Atlanta Braves.
The Braves became America's team.
When we bought them in 1976, they were terrible.
By 1995, Ted and his team were World Series champs. As he built the superstation, he set his sights even higher on a 24-hour news channel.
I worked till 7 o'clock, and when I got home, the news was over. So I missed television news completely, and I figured there were lots of people like me.
People did look upon that as a foolish idea that was destined for failure, but they underestimated Ted Turner.
Most of the leaders of the world thought Ted was nuts.
We sign on June 1, and barring satellite problems in the future, we won't be signing off until the world ends. We'll be on, we will cover it live. I dedicate the news channel for America, the cable news network.
Take 11, Mike Q.
CNN aired its first broadcast on June 1st, 1980.
Good evening, I'm David Walker.
And I'm Lois Hart. Now here's the news.
It took 5 years to turn a profit.
I lived for 20 years in my office.
He was one of us. I mean, he would be in his house coat down having breakfast in the Hard News Cafe.
And we'll get better by the end of the week.
Critics called it chicken noodle news.
Hello, Baghdad.
But the Gulf War would give CNN the respect it deserved.
You're going to hear the bombs now. They are hitting the center of this city.
It was the first time a war was broadcast live on television, and it was only on CNN.
I still believe that was the greatest scoop in the history of journalism.
You can see her there.
Ted didn't care as much about ratings as he did about being the most trusted name in news.
Ted also cared about the world. Over a 10-year period, he donated $1 billion to the United Nations.
I'm no poorer than I was not 9 months ago, and the world is a lot better off.
And he expanded his empire, launching networks like TNT and Turner Classic Movies. In his personal life, Ted was married and divorced twice with 5 children before he finally met his match, Jane Fonda.
She agreed to have dinner with me. For me, it was love at first sight.
I can't ever forget the reasons that made me fall in love with him. I've never met any human being that thinks the way Ted does.
Ted was a visionary, a titan, even Time Magazine's Man of the Year. But in 1996, he sold his networks to Time Warner. He got almost $8 billion.
I said, Ted, if you sell You will no longer be captain of your own ship.
Ted Turner. Ted.
5 years later, Time Warner merged with AOL, and Ted was out.
Ted used the description, I've been fired. Ted got shafted, and it hurt.
It was more than just a company to me. It was a way of life.
He lost his empire and the love of his life. After 10 years of marriage, he and Jane parted ways.
But you love her still?
Yeah.
To this very day?
To this very day.
But Ted never gave up. His final act, saving the planet. He created the UN Foundation and the Nuclear Threat Initiative. On his Montana ranch, he made it his mission to save the bison.
Hi. Well, you never go home, do you?
I know. And he opened restaurants to ensure their survival.
Ted's love of the outdoors has made him perhaps the number one environmentalist that I've ever known.
Before his 80th birthday, Ted revealed he had Lewy body dementia, a progressive disease. He spent his final years treasuring private moments, his ranch, and his family.
He wants to know that when he goes out, it will be with the love of his children and grandchildren.
You can never take away what he created and what he did.
We have never seen a man quite like Ted Turner before on this planet. And I don't think we'll ever see another one like him again.
There's the amazing American success story, the businessman, the visionary, the revolutionary who created really a media revolution. And you know, every single thing that followed him, anything in the 24/7 genre started with Ted Turner. Everything was a copy, if I dare say so myself, and not the best copies. He was the original. And he made us all proud, and he made us all hopeful, and he made us all strive for his vision of a better world, whether it was in news or whether it was in the philanthropy. He was the first of the modern day philanthropists after the Carnegies and the Mellons and the Rockefellers of their generation. As Wolf just pointed out, when he gave $1 billion to the UN Foundation, and then Bill Gates, and then Warren Buffett, and then Michael Bloomberg, and all the others joined in to follow in that incredibly noble pursuit. He was big, huge on climate, and that's a global issue, obviously. He was way ahead of the curve on climate and climate mitigation. And I remember asking him in one of my last interviews with him, what would you say to the young people who look up to you and who want to make their own first $1 billion? How would you suggest they do that now? And he said, climate, green technology, the green economy. He was so sure, and he was always so absolutely right. And as Wolf was saying, you know, he was somebody who believed in breaking down the barriers between peoples and between nations. I remember when I was still, you know, in 1980s in New York, and I was climbing up the ranks. I started in September 1983 in Atlanta. And I remember when he banned the word foreign, and I was absolutely devastated. I wanted to be a foreign correspondent like Edward R. Murrow and all those people. And he brought the word international. And it wasn't just a little thing. It was because he didn't want to drive, you know, a wedge into people by calling them foreign. And he didn't want to have separation. Imagine that kind of leader and what we're left with right now when everything's about, you know, weaponization of identities and beliefs and all the rest of it. He was exactly the opposite. When he took CNN International in 1985, what he did was not just be the first ever global TV 24/7 behemoth network, but he also chipped down the walls of state and authoritarian regulated media. So all these nations where the people could only see what they were fed by their authoritarian leaders, and I'm now talking about that part of the world, you know, he gave them something else. He opened their eyes to the rest of the world. And I thought that was absolutely fundamental. And he said to us when we were in the Gulf War, he said, look, I'm not going to force anybody to be in Baghdad, which of course was the enemy capital for the United States. We had been reporting in Saudi Arabia and around. And we also had distinguished ourselves as CNN, the reporters there in Baghdad. But when it came to the war, you had the president, you had the, you know, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, you had all these people call Tom Johnson, our president, and say, you better get your people out of Baghdad because it's going to be real and they might get killed. And Tom basically went to Ted and said what he had heard. And Ted said, look, I'm not going to force anybody, It'll be volunteer, but we must be in Baghdad. In other words, we must tell all sides of the story. And how incredibly important is that in today's world, when we tell all sides of the story, we can be accused of taking sides. No, we're telling all sides of the story without fear nor favor, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's, on climate, whatever it might be, whether it's in the United States and elsewhere. So look, remember when giants strode the world? Ted Turner was a giant, and he risked his life in many occasions, including in his, swashbuckling sailor days, winning the America's Cup, but also the Fastnet race, one of the most dangerous ever around the Isle of Wight. The race he won that year, there was more than a dozen people killed in a massive storm there. So he was brave. I was going to say ballsy, but he was really. He said it like it was and like it is. And we were his willing foot soldiers. And I think he changed not just the world, but all of our lives too.